Hello. Welcome back to this series that I'm calling Overcoming Negative Reactions When Triggered by Your Mate. So maybe some of you do not get triggered, um, but some of you do. Well, this is segment 8 of sharing success stories of different situations where couples got triggered and they were able to respond differently in a way that they began to move closer together rather than more distant and disconnected. This is segment 8. And part of the foundation of what I'm sharing with you is based on the reality that love and marriage is the perfect place to get to know you. To get to know you, how you show up, and whether you're having the loving impact that you think you do. You probably notice it when things are going well, but maybe not so much when things are not going well. The other part of this is paying attention to how you're showing up with understanding, love, and respect when things are going well, because it's easy to do it then, as well as when there are challenges and when there is stress, especially when you tend to become defensive. If it feels like your partner misunderstands you, criticizes you, or disrespects you. Now, the reason why it's important to peel away the layers beneath the surface is because beneath the surface is an opportunity. It's an opportunity for both of you to become aware of what is trying to grow within you. Sometimes it's growth and healing. But what is yearning to grow within you when there are challenges in your relationship with each other? Because what happens is for human beings, when they get triggered, flooded with emotions, and that's when things go off track. People they call themselves trying to have a conversation, but it's really difficult to do that when you're in reactive mode. And so what I have been doing is been presenting Cliff Note stories about couples who have turned their frustrations, challenges around into growth opportunities, which is available to everyone if they're open to it. Because when you get to the bottom of it, when you have an opportunity to really talk things through and get to know yourself more deeply and get to know your partner and find out what is going on beneath the surface, then you expand the options and the opportunities to dissolve the problem just by talking it through, resolve the problem, or manage it more effectively. So in this case study, as well as the other case studies, as these couples work things through, they were delighted to see in themselves and each other a better version of themselves emerging. So this time, this segment is about broken promises. So the couple in this story, I'm calling Henry and Helen. Excuse me. And like I said before, if there's a Henry and Helen out there watching or listening, I'm not talking about you because I haven't met you. This is a couple that is an example. These Cliff Notes are an example of their experience. They were navigating the challenges of broken promises, Helen, and simmering anger, Henry, in their 30-year marriage. And it's their 7th year as empty nesters. So here's the deal. Helen had a tendency, really a habit, of breaking small promises as well as big promises throughout their 30 years. And so they would argue about it. Nothing would get resolved. And she'd break another promise. Henry would get upset. And so and sometimes it got really tense and hot because it was very disappointing and hurtful for Henry. And so Helen kept apologizing. I won't do it again. I didn't get to it because I took care of this and took care of that. And so Henry got to the point that he just didn't want to hear it anymore. So after their last blow up, they realized that they had a decision to make, to either stay stuck or to resolve it, dissolve it, or manage it. They took path number 2. So I've been talking about in the other segments how change begins within. So it's important for both people, both partners, both spouses to look at what it is they are going to change. But first, both parties have to do an internal assessment about what triggered them and why they reacted the way that they did, and then peel away to discovering, pinpointing what they wanted instead, because couples get stuck in what is going wrong. They don't navigate past that because, like I was saying earlier, flooded with all these feelings. They're not in problem solving mode, so it's hard to do. So I'm going to share with you a couple things that both of them did. So for Henry, he decided that, number one, he couldn't change Helen. He didn't like what she was doing, breaking the habits. That was very hurtful to him. But he knew that if he kept reacting the way that he was, that Helen was going to continue to be reactive. So he decided that he was going to put himself in a position to calm down and become reflective. He even learned how to meditate and he discovered mindfulness. So he started doing that just so that not only calm down so he could have the conversation with Helen, but also so that he could reduce his stress level. So in that safe place of reflection, he became introspective and began to understand the root cause of his anger. Yes, it was about the broken promises, but it was also about something bigger, and he got in touch with that. So when he was able to work that through, then he was prepared to have the conversation with Helen. And what that means is he prepared himself to constructively express his feelings calmly, clearly, so that he did not resort to yelling or criticism. So he didn't just express his feelings, he expressed his desires. And he expressed why Helen's behavior was hurtful to him. So what happened with Helen? And remember, these are Cliff Notes. So Helen, she did want to make a change. And so she knew that that was not the best version of herself to make promises to the man that she loved all of these years. She wanted to stop. So she began to recognize and understand and accept the impact of her broken promises on her beloved. And so when she went into self-discovery, she discovered many reasons why she was breaking promises, and none of them were intentional. But when she got in touch with the root of the problem, one of the things that she got in touch with in terms of trying to please people, she would overcommit. And then she couldn't fulfill her promises not only to Henry, but other people as well, as work, family members, the children when they were living at home. And so she got to the place where she began to avoid overcommitting. And she wasn't able to do it overnight. but that was her intention, and she worked on it until she was able to develop that habit and stay consistent with it. And so, in the process of her doing that, she was really mindful of making sure that Henry knew that even though she was doing it to fulfill a desire that he had, she was also doing it for her, because she was stressed out, taking all of those, making all those promises to so many people and not being able to humanly fulfill them. So she got herself in order, and not only did she reduce her commitments, she began to take small, consistent steps to commit to just a couple of things. And when she did it consistently, she was able to build trust with her husband and also other people that she committed to, and there was no way that she could fulfill those promises. So what happened? What got them started was the three things that I've talked about in the other segments. One, because we're talking about first steps, because there were a lot of things that they did to bridge the gap. But the first thing that they were able to do was they discovered how to talk to each other in a way that the other can hear, meaning no finger pointing, no criticism, no judgment. They discovered a positive way to get their message across to each other in a way that did not frustrate and upset the other. That was number one. And this is the theme of the series. The second thing was they did discover how to listen with curiosity in a way that the other person felt heard. So my question to you, what is it like for you when you're having a conversation with your beloved about a sensitive issue or something that's really, really, really important, and your partner is talking to you, and it's like, as you're listening to them, you can really hear what they have to say because of the way that they're saying it. How many of you out there have had that experience? And how many of you would love to have that experience? Or if you have it sometimes, would like to have it more, right? So that's the first thing they were able to do. The second thing was the listening with curiosity. Now, that's easier said than done, especially since people try to listen when they're triggered, because they are really not totally present, because they're trying to think of their response. I mean, they're already triggered, so they're in defense mode. And so they're not hearing it. They're not hearing the other person talk. They're not hearing the message. And then the third thing, which is the same three steps that I've talked about in the different scenarios. They made a plan, and then they had to work the plan. Now, here's the thing. Now, working the plan in terms of bridging the gap from where they are to where they want it to be, like I was saying earlier, it's not an overnight experience. They experience resistance and challenges along the way, but they stayed with it. Like sometimes they even felt like, you know what, this is not working. This is, why are we even trying? But then they remember their positive intention and their purpose for redirecting their focus, because this was a big thing that got in the way for them to experience more pleasant days together. I often share with couples how important it is on a daily basis to do things and say things that where you're making deposits in your relationship bank. And if you are dealing with challenges consistently, then instead of making deposits where you're going to feel closer together and feel understood, loved, and respected, you're going to experience withdrawals. And what is that going to lead to? Over time, it leads to bankruptcy. And what happens to the relationship? Sometimes there's a divorce or a breakup. Other times, couples will struggle under the same roof and live like parallel lives. You go your way, I go my way, and never the twain shall meet, And since the children weren't at home anymore, couples in that situation could no longer say, I'm staying together for the children. So they stayed with it. They were successful over time. Over time. And so, again, part of their success is they both knew that they both needed to change their reaction to each other and become more reflective. So they too paid attention to the revised prayer of serenity. God grant me the serenity to accept the people I cannot change, the courage to change the one I can, and the wisdom to know that person is me. Yes, they embraced that. And so the other part that contributed to their success was that they created a safe, emotional environment to have the conversations. And the other thing that they were pleased about was what part of themselves that was showing up. Henry was pleased about the better part of him showing up, that he was being calm, curious, understanding. Helen noticed that for herself, that she began showing up more reflective in terms of making sure that when she made a promise, that she was going to keep it. And so in terms of, she was looking at her character. She said, is that who I want to be for the rest of my life? Her answer was no. So she decided that she was going to be more present to herself and to Henry. So even though these are cliff notes, and all of these are cliff notes, but the point is the same, that whatever the challenge, in most cases, in many cases, whatever the challenge is, there is a way, if both parties are willing to talk it through, work it through, get on the other side of it, and tap into a better version of themselves in the process. So, can any of you relate to Henry and Helen? Are any of you struggling with the fact that your partner breaks promises to you, or do you have a tendency to break promises sometimes? If you have had the opportunity to successfully work this through, would you be willing to share one thing that you did to make that happen in the comment section? And then if you are struggling with an issue like this, feel free to ask a question in the comments section, or if you want to ask me privately, directly, you can do that as well. And so this is segment 8 of this series. I have 1 or 2 more to go, and then I have something that I'm going to share with you, but that's going to be later on. Thank you so much for joining me. I look forward to connecting with you next time. Take care.